Hi, my name is Kat Parker, and this is my presentation for AVS 343. Today I'll be exploring a question that many dog owners have asked at some point. Why do dogs tilt their head at certain noises? Many people assume dogs tilt their heads because they're confused or curious, but recent studies suggest this behavior is far more complex. Head tilting may help dogs localize sound or pay closer attention to familiar speech, especially when it's emotionally meaningful. This makes the behavior highly relevant in real-world contexts, like training, communication, and behavioral assessments. Understanding it can better help pet owners, trainers, and veterinarians interpret what a dog is trying to communicate, and avoid mislabeling the behavior as something meaningless. To understand head tilting in dogs, we need to take a big picture approach that draws on multiple scientific fields. This behavior involves elements of neuroscience, which explores how the brain processes sound and speech, physiology, which looks at hearing abilities and anatomy, and evolutionary biology, which considers how behaviors have developed across species. For veterinary professionals and behaviorists, recognizing these interdisciplinary connections can reveal signs of cognitive engagement, a dog's effort to process, focus, or understand. And all of this ties into the concept of P equals G times E, or phenotype equals genes times environment. In other words, a dog's behavior is shaped by both its biology and its experiences. To study behavior scientifically, researchers use something called an ethogram. An ethogram is a formal list of behaviors, each clearly defined so that they can be observed and measured consistently. For this project, I focused on head tilting as my target behavior. I defined it as a lateral movement of the head, typically 15 degrees or more, that is sustained for over 1 second. The context can vary. It might occur after a person speaks, during a toy naming task, or when a dog hears a new or unexpected sound. To measure head tilting behavior, researchers rely on direct observation, often using video recordings to capture and review responses frame by frame. Once recorded, they track how often a dog tilts its head, in what direction, and under what conditions. Before diving into the research, it's helpful to understand how scientists approach the study of animal behavior. One of the most widely used frameworks in the field was developed by Nico Tinbergen. He proposed that to fully explain a behavior, we need to answer 4 key questions. First is mechanism, or causation. This asks how the behavior occurs in the moment. What triggers it? Second is ontogeny, or development. This looks at how the behavior changes over the animal's life. Is it learned? Is it shaped by training, experience, or age? Third is phylogeny, or evolution. This asks how the behavior evolved across species. And fourth is adaptive significance, or function. This asks why the behavior exists. What benefit does it offer for survival and communication? These 4 questions form the foundation for interpreting the scientific studies you'll see in the next section of this presentation. This study by Jiren Rao and colleagues looked at how accurately dogs could identify where a sound was coming from. Dogs were trained to respond to 2 speakers placed at different angles. Researchers tracked how small the difference between those angles could be before the dog started making errors. Dogs needed at least 11.8 degrees of separation to choose a correct speaker, but by the end of the study, they could detect differences as small as 7.4 degrees. This suggests that dogs can fine-tune their ability to localize sound through practice, potentially using behaviors like head tilting to help focus on the source. In this study, Buckley and colleagues investigated whether dogs tilt their head more when they hear speech that is emotionally significant or familiar. They played 4 types of speech to the dogs: happy and familiar, neutral, unfamiliar phrases, and silence. The dogs tilted their head much more often during familiar, happy speech, suggesting they were engaged more actively with emotionally relevant language. The study also found a rightward tilt bias, especially in male dogs. This is interesting because the right side of the body is controlled by the brain's left hemisphere, which is associated with language processing. Overall, the findings suggest that head tilting might help dogs process or focus on speech they recognize and care about. This study by Barber and colleagues compared the hearing abilities of dogs and humans, focusing on how different factors like ear and head shape can affect sound detection. Humans can typically hear frequencies between 31 and 19,000 hertz. In contrast, dogs can detect a much wider range, from 67 up to 45,000 hertz. That means that they're able to pick up much higher pitch sounds than we can. Interestingly, the study also found that dogs with smaller heads tended to detect higher frequency sounds more easily. This matters because it suggests that head shape plays a role in how the sound is processed. A dog may tilt its head to better align its ears and improve its ability to detect or localize specific sounds. Cunningham and Ramos examined how training and familiarity with humans affect how dogs respond to cues, both verbal and visual. They compared shelter dogs, pet dogs, and highly trained dogs and tested how well each group followed pointing gestures and smoking commands. The results showed that training dogs and pets with strong human bonds responded more accurately, while untrained shelter dogs were less consistent. This suggests that behaviors like head tilting could be learned or reinforced through social interaction and training. This addresses the ontogeny question. It shows how behavior develops over the dog's life based on its experiences and social exposure. This study by Semes and colleagues focused on dogs with exceptional verbal learning skills, referred to as gifted word learners or GWLs. These dogs were asked to retrieve specific toys by name, and researchers often found that they tilted their heads when hearing the cue. GWL dogs tilted their heads in 43% of the trials, while typical dogs only did so about 2% of the time. Even more interesting, each gifted dog showed a consistent tilt direction, which suggests lateralization, or dominance on one side of the brain. It supports the mechanism question by supporting what's happening during the behavior, and the phylogenical question because it suggests that this might be a trait that evolved and emerged in domestic dogs with advanced communication abilities. Here I've mapped each of the 5 studies into Tinbergen's 4 questions to summarize which aspects of the behavior they helped explain. The mechanism question was addressed in 4 slides, all of which showed how dogs use head tilting in the moment to focus, lateralize sound, or process language. Orthogeny was covered by Cunningham, who showed that trained dogs or those with stronger human bonds were more responsive and possibly more likely to engage in head tilting. Phylogeny was touched on by Semens's work with gifted word learners, suggesting that this could be a trait emerged through domestication. And adaptive significance was supported by Buckley's findings, which showed that tilting is more common in response to emotionally meaningful speech. So, ultimate question, why do dogs tilt their head at certain noises? Based on this research, I believe head tilting is a cognitively driven behavior. It's not just a reflex, it's a purposeful way for dogs to focus on and process sounds, especially meaningful speech. This behavior seems to be shaped by both genetic and environmental influences, which aligns with the concept of P equals G times E. We see evidence of brain lateralization and possible breed-related differences in dogs that show strong verbal learning. Factors like training, exposure to speech, and bonding with humans increases the likelihood and frequency of the behavior. While the current research gives us valuable insight, there are still gaps that future studies could address. First, we need more research on ontogeny, especially in young dogs. At what age does head tilting begin? How does it change with socialization and training? Understanding this could help trainers and veterinarians identify communication cues earlier in life. Second, phylogeny remains understudied. We don't yet know whether wild relatives like foxes or wolves tilt their heads in similar situations. And if they don't, it might mean that this behavior emerged through domestication, possibly as a tool for better human-dog communication. Studying these areas could help us refine training and enrichment strategies. It could help us develop better behavioral assessments and even improve how we diagnose cognitive or hearing issues in dogs. In short, the simple behavior has a lot to teach us still. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my presentation. I hope this helped you see head tilting in dogs as more as just than a little habit. It's a complex, meaningful behavior. Thank you.